At the train station, a very bright light suddenly shines through the window. When a homeless man turns around, he's shocked to see Prot appear out of nowhere under the light. At that moment, two kids push an old lady to steal her purse and run away. Prot tries to help the lady stand up, only for the cops to arrive and assume he's the robber. The homeless man and the old lady immediately clarify that he didn't do it. An officer asks Prot if he's traveling, so he explains he just arrived and he's done traveling for now. When she asks about his luggage and his ticket, Prot says he doesn't need luggage and he didn't arrive by train. Next, the cop asks him to remove his sunglasses, but he refuses because this planet is really bright. These strange answers cause the cops to arrest him. They also ask the homeless man which gate Prot came out of, so the guy tells them he didn't come from any gate. A month later at the Psychiatric Institute of Manhattan, Dr. Mark is having a therapy session with Ernie, a man who is terrified of going outside because of the deadly germs. Ernie doesn't take off his mask until Mark closes the window and keeps complaining about germs being everywhere, like the cafeteria food. Afterward, a new patient is transferred from another hospital. Mark goes to the lab and watches Prot for a second before the doctors fill him in. The cops sent Prot to the hospital under suspicion of hallucinogenic intoxication, but all his tests came out clean. There are no signs of illnesses or concussions either. He's been diagnosed with amnesia and delusions because he keeps claiming that he's come from another planet. The doctors have heavily medicated him, yet there's been no change in behavior, which shocks Mark. They found no ID on him and no missing person report matches his description, but they did find some papers with weird symbols in his pocket. Then Prot is taken to Mark's office and he comments on the expressions Mark uses to talk. He also takes a red apple from a bowl, saying it's his favorite. Prot knows everyone thinks he's crazy, but he swears he isn't. He does feel a bit homesick and claims his home is a planet named K-Pax, which is 1,000 light years away in the Lyra constellation. To come to Earth, he harnessed the energy of light and traveled many times that speed. When Mark asks why he looks human, Prot explains that he looks human here, but on K-Pax he looks like a K-Paxian. This isn't the first time he visits Earth, and he keeps coming because he's curious about planets that are still in early stages of evolution. Later in the common room, patient Howie asks Prot about his home planet. Prot shares some descriptions, like the 7 purple moons and the 2 suns. Meanwhile, Mark goes home to his wife Rachel and their daughters. However, he doesn't pay attention to anything Rachel says. The next day, Mark shares with his colleagues a recording of his chat with Prot. They learned he's been to 64 planets and that he arrived on Earth 4 years and 9 months ago. He also claims to be 337 years old. The doctors discuss a possible diagnosis, but they can't think of anything immune to the medicine Prot was given in the other hospital. Mark wonders if he truly is an alien, and the others laugh. During the next session, Prot eats a banana with the peel on. Mark asks about K-Paxian babies, so Prot explains that their reproduction process is very painful. He pauses their chat to write some things down in his notebook, since he's keeping a report of all the places he's visited. After the session, Prot returns to the common room and says hello to all the patients by name. Bess doesn't reply, and Ernie explains she doesn't talk to anybody because she's afraid smoke will come out of her mouth. She was brought to the institute as a child after she burned her house down, although Howie says it was an electrical fire. Meanwhile, Doris yells at the nurse and throws food at his face for asking her to come out, knowing she never leaves her room. Prot comes closer and notices her table is set for 2, so he asks if he can join. Doris calls him a gentleman and fixes her hair and makeup while confessing she's been waiting for someone for 11 years. In the lab, a doctor tells Mark about Prot's test results. He definitely has a sensitivity to white light and can detect ultraviolet rays, which humans can't do. During the next session, Mark turns off the lights and shuts the blinds, so Prot finally takes off his sunglasses. Mark asks him about his family, but Prot reveals that on his planet children are raised by everyone and there are no families. There is no marriage, no government, and no laws either. They don't punish people who do wrong things because an eye for an eye is seen as a stupid policy. During a family meeting, Mark talks to his brother-in-law Steve, who is an astronomer. He asks him for some difficult questions that he can use to challenge Prot's story. Sometime later, a nurse informs Mark that Howie hasn't moved from the window in hours. When Mark checks on him, Howie explains he's looking for the bluebird of happiness. He says that Prot told him to do so as the first of 3 tasks. If he completes them, he'll be cured. Mark then looks out the window and is shocked to see that Prot has managed to bring Ernie to the garden. He rushes outside and scolds Prot for interfering with the people's treatments, pointing out that Prot is a patient and he is the doctor. Prot wonders why Mark hasn't healed anyone then and hands them some papers with the answers to all the astronomy questions. When Steve receives all the answers, he's shocked to read them all since Prot knows things that a mere hobbyist with a telescope can't know. He calls Mark to tell him all this and Mark asks if any astrophysicists are missing, but Steve doesn't know of any. As days pass, Mark becomes obsessed with Prot's case and grows frustrated because there isn't any progress. He even works on the case at home and ignores his family. One evening, Mark decides to take Prot to the observatory and the scientists there ask him a bunch of questions. They want to see how he travels through light and Prot simply blinks, saying he left and already came back. The scientists don't take him seriously and ask more questions, so Prot uses their equipment to draw a map of various solar systems and adds some equations that solve a few astronomy problems that humans have been unable to explain. Everyone is in shock and they don't understand how he could know these things. In the institute, Howie finally sees the blue bird and yells in excitement. He starts gathering all the patients and employees and soon a crowd is happily gathering around the window. When Mark checks on all the commotion, he's shocked to see that even Doris has come out to look at the bird. In the evening, Bess visits Prot and says he's the bluebird. Sometime later, Sal asks Prot to teach him how to light travel because he wants to leave. He worked as a doorman for an important hotel for 15 years, and one day he started to notice a horrible smell everywhere. They sent him to the institute and he's been here for the past 10 years. Prot is the first person he meets who doesn't stink, so Sal thinks he may help him. When Prot tells him stories about the nice smells on his planet, Sal says he wants to go, but Prot clarifies that he can only take one person back with him. Soon Mark learns that almost every patient thinks they're going to K-Pax. Prot assures him that he's told everyone he can only take one person and announces he's leaving on July 27th, at 5:51. He chose that date for safety reasons. That night, Mark is startled awake by a realization. Ignoring his family, he rushes to his office and checks the recording of Prot's sessions. He said he arrived on Earth 4 years, 9 months, and 3 days ago. Mark does the math and confirms that July 27th will be the 5th year, that's why Prot wants to leave on that date. He theorizes that a traumatizing event must have happened to him on that date. Rachel scolds him for working at this hour and leaves his office in a huff. On the 4th of July, Mark's family has another gathering and he invites Prot to join them. Prot immediately befriends the family dog, who never liked anyone before. He proceeds to translate what the dog is saying so the kids can start treating her better. During lunch, there's a special vegetarian dish just for him since he doesn't eat meat. Prot has a great time and by looking at some photographs, he learns that Mark has a son from his first marriage who doesn't talk to him anymore. He tells Rachel that there are no families on his planet and she thinks he's missing something very important. While Prot helps one of the girls on the swing, the other kids turn on the sprinklers and the noise makes Prot freeze. The girl tries to make him play too but Prot pulls her back, saying they shouldn't get in the water. As the men of the family run to hold Prot down, Rachel takes her daughter away. A nurse gets a sedative ready, but Prot finally calms down when they turn off the sprinklers. He mentions apple pie and walks to the table as if nothing had happened. The next day Mark has to explain to his boss that it was all an accident and swears that Prot isn't dangerous. He theorizes that the water must have triggered a memory of a traumatic incident and wants to do a regression exercise. It may be too dangerous, but he feels like he's running out of time. Mark goes looking for Prot and the other patients tell him that he left to visit a few more countries before his departure. The whole team of doctors panics when they confirm that Prot isn't in the building, so they call the authorities. 3 nights later Mark keeps calling shelters to no avail and ends up falling asleep on his desk. The next morning, Mark looks out the window and finds Prot casually resting in a tree. Prot claims he's visited many countries and points out that he did announce he was leaving. When Mark mentions hypnosis, Prot turns him down, but Mark says that if he doesn't do it, his superiors will fill him up with sedatives. While the other doctors watch from behind the window, Mark proceeds to hypnotize Prot and asks him about important events of his childhood. Prot remembers the funeral of his best friend's father but doesn't recall the man's name. This father got hurt in the slaughterhouse where he worked and died later, but Prot refuses to say the location. He clearly feels very uncomfortable and his pulse rate starts going up very quickly. Mark asks a question to visit another memory and Prot calms down. He mentions that he and his best friend used to look at the stars together with his dad's telescope, and he still insists that he's an alien. His best friend isn't doing very well now, that's why Prot came back. Seeing that his patient is starting to feel uncomfortable again, Mark decides to wake him up and Prot doesn't realize that the hypnosis already happened. Afterward Mark asks his secretary to search for slaughterhouses in rural areas with clear night skies. Meanwhile the patients are arguing over who will get to leave with Prot, so Howie comes up with an idea. They'll have to write an essay proving why they must be chosen, and Prot agrees to read them all. Soon Prot agrees to be hypnotized again. He thinks he's with his best friend in 1985 but refuses to say the other boy's name, so Mark decides to call him Pete. Back then, Pete was 17 and Prot was 175. Pete had a pregnant girlfriend named Sarah and was panicking about his future. Prot starts getting uncomfortable again so Mark asks for a different memory. In 1991, Prot came back to visit Pete, who was working at the slaughterhouse and got married to Sarah. Sometime later Mark is called to check on Ernie in the infirmary because Howie tried to kill him in his sleep. Mark is worried but Ernie assures him he's fine, even saying it was wonderful. While Howie was choking him Ernie stopped breathing, so Howie rushed him to the infirmary and brought him back to life. When Ernie woke up, he realized that dying isn't something you have control over, so it's a waste of life to be afraid of it. Now Ernie feels great and is ready to do riskier things like eating fish with bones. Next Mark checks on Howie, who guesses he's cured Ernie. He says that this was his second task from Prot and he only needs one more to be cured too. The following day, Mark hypnotizes Prot again and mentions the date July 27, 1996. Prot says he's on K-Pax, but he feels something is wrong with Pete, so he immediately travels to Earth. He finds Pete jumping into the river to self-delete because of something horrible that happened, but Prot refuses to say what. His vitals start going crazy, yet Mark refuses to wake him up because he wants answers. Suddenly Prot pushes Mark off and falls to his knees to have a huge breakdown. The nurses rush in to sedate him, but Mark stops them and carefully approaches Prot to wake him up. Some things fell from Prot's pockets during the incident, so Mark picks them up. On his way home, Mark realizes he still has Prot's pencil in his pocket. Looking at it, he finds the number 505 and the word Salva. He rushes to a payphone to make some calls and confirms that 505 is the area code for New Mexico. After realizing that Salva stands for Salvation Army, he returns to the office to put this information together with his secretary's research. By searching for a place with a river, a slaughterhouse, and a Salvation Army, they find Guadalupe County. On the news for July 27, 1996, they read that a man named Robert Porter drowned. Mark immediately flies to Guadalupe County and asks the sheriff about the case. Robert had been smart and kind, and he lived outside of town with his wife and child. The sheriff takes Mark to Robert's old house and tells him what happened. A criminal broke into the house and took advantage of Robert's wife before killing both her and the daughter. When Robert came home from work, he found the bodies of his loved ones and snapped so badly that he killed the criminal by breaking his neck. Outside the house, Mark finds sprinklers and a swing just like his own garden, and imagines Robert washing his blood-stained hands there. Next, the sheriff takes Mark to the river and shows him where they found Robert's clothes. They think he self-deleted, but the body was never found. On July 27th, the patients are having a little party to gather all the essays and say goodbye to Prot. Mark calls him to his office for a last drink. Prot says that nobody misses him back on K-Pax, but he gets the feeling that he'll be missed on Earth. He tells Mark to call his son and fix things. Mark then shows him a high school yearbook with a photo of Robert Porter, confirming they look exactly the same. When Mark says they're the same person, Prot denies it and asks Mark to take care of Robert after he's gone. Afterward, Prot joins the party. Sal wants to know who is the chosen one, and Prot says they'll get extra points for going to bed early, so everyone rushes to their rooms. On her way out, Bess drops her crumpled essay on the table. Howie stays to ask for his last task, so Prot tells him to stay here and be prepared for anything. Then Howie gives him the essays before going to his room too, and Prot adds Bess' abandoned paper on the pile. Meanwhile, Mark is visited by Rachel, who has brought him food. He's grateful and tries to be a better husband. In the middle of the night, lights flicker above the city. A few hours later, Mark realizes he's overslept and it's almost 5:51. As he rushes downstairs, he notices that the sun is slowly coming out and realizes that Prot chose sunrise as his departure time. In his room, Prot takes off his glasses and stares at the window. The nurse guarding the door notices he's moving, but at that moment the security cameras stop working. By the time Mark makes it to the room, he can't see Prot anywhere. A closer look reveals his unconscious body under the bed. The nurses take the body out on a stretcher and the other patients are confused because they don't see him as Prot anymore. Ernie points out that Prot is gone, and the group suddenly realizes that Bess has disappeared. They run to her room and find her essay on her bed. Howie reads it to confirm that she was the chosen one, and the last page shows the message, "I have no home." As days pass, Mark continues to take care of Robert's catatonic body because Prot asked him to. The man is alive, but he won't move or talk. It turns out Prot was an alien who used his best friend's body after his self-deletion to visit Earth. Robert's personality only came out when the trauma was triggered by the sprinklers and the hypnosis. Prot said he could only take one person to K-Pax because he needed a new body. Mark tells Robert stories of how all the patients are doing better thanks to him, and shares that Bess was never found. After work, Mark goes to the station and finally is brave enough to reunite with his son. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.